of Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, we should understand how Siegel ended up in Las Vegas and California to begin with and how that led to his downfall. Obviously, we know that Benny Siegel grew up with Meyer Lansky as they were childhood friends. It was through Lansky that Siegel meets Lucky Luciano and would become one of the founding members of Murder Incorporated. After the Volstead Act was repealed, i.e. the Prohibition, Siegel moved directly from bootlegging to gambling. Eventually, Dutch Schultz and Albert Anastasia would take over Murder Incorporated, and Siegel would moonlight for them as a prolific hitman. Siegel would begin to have problems with the Fabrizio brothers, who were in a beef with Benny Siegel over gambling rackets. The Fabrizio brothers were close to Waxy Gordon, who was a multimillionaire gambler and bootlegger. Over the years, Meyer Lansky and Waxy Gordon had a lot of beefs, specifically over bootlegging and turf and territory. And what ended up happening was Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel ratted out Gordon to the IRS, which led Gordon to getting arrested and sentenced to prison. That move infuriated Waxy Gordon, who from behind the wall ordered the Fabrizio brothers to kill Benjamin Bugsy Siegel as a result. The Fabrizio brothers attempted to kill Siegel by planting a bomb at the Waldorf Astoria. Benny Siegel would ultimately end up killing the Fabrizio brothers, but then there was an issue. A third brother, Tony Fabrizio, wrote a memoir and sent it to his attorney, and there were details in that book about Luciano and Lansky and others. The mob found out, and they sent Benjamin Bugsy Siegel to kill Tony Fabrizio. Siegel checked himself into a hospital late one night and then sneaks out, goes to Fabrizio's house, pretends to be a detective, knocks on the door, and as soon as Tony opens the door, Siegel blasts him, killing him on the spot. The problem then was others who supported Waxy Gordon and the Fabrizios wanted to kill Benny Siegel, and his alibi began to fall apart. Siegel then gets sent to California, not only to save his life, but the Mafia wanted full control of the gambling rackets out in Los Angeles. At the time, Jack Dragna was the main force, but he wasn't a strong leader, so sending Benny Siegel out to Los Angeles handled two issues that were pressing. It would save Siegel's life, and it would allow the Mafia to fully control all of the gambling out west. What ends up happening is Bugsy goes out there and ends up just taking over everything. Dragna, who began to loathe Siegel, had no choice but to play along. Dragna would send word to Luciano, but he was told to back off and let Benny Siegel handle things any way he wanted to. It also didn't help that Benjamin Bugsy Siegel made Mickey Cohen his number two, who in many ways was more violent than Siegel, and that's saying something. So once Benny Siegel is out in Los Angeles, he takes over all of the gambling rackets and he begins to help Chicago establish the National Racing Wire. And he also helped establish drug shipping routes through Mexico. While Siegel took over the Racing Wire, some problems began to happen. The Racing Wire, which was owned and facilitated by the Chicago outfit, began to falter because of Siegel betting Hollywood celebrities. In other words, he was just too busy mixing with all different people to handle his business. They expected Benny Siegel to be around, and he just often wasn't. That forced Chicago to push Siegel's percentage of the Racing Wire to Jack Dragna, which infuriated Benny Siegel. Siegel then moved into the Screen Actors Guild and different unions and took them over completely. He began extorting movie studios and then absorbed the Los Angeles Teamsters and then the Screen Extras Guild. He then launched a major prostitution ring. Siegel was there to handle mob interests and began to expand into areas that began to upset the apple cart. A few years into his Hollywood life, he heard that William Wilkerson was having some problems. Wilkerson was the founder of The Hollywood Reporter and was also a real estate mogul. Siegel had just purchased the El Cortez, which was a hotel off of Fremont Street. His plans were simple. He wanted to expand, make it into a casino and a resort, but because of his criminal background, city politicians wouldn't allow him to do anything with the property. So essentially, he was out back. So he begins to look for other options. Wilkerson had grand ideas for the Flamingo Hotel and Casino because one of the things that people get wrong is by saying that it was simply Bugsy Siegel's idea to go to Vegas and start casinos when it really wasn't. There were others there before him that had started to sort of move in that direction. But one of the problems that Wilkerson had was that he didn't have enough money to do it the right way. Siegel hears about this from somebody else and he acts immediately. What Siegel does is he approaches Wilkerson pretending to be a wealthy businessman, and what he does is he purchases 2/3 stake interest in the hotel. And then eventually what he does is just pushes Wilkerson out entirely. So it was a strong arm move. With Siegel now owning the hotel, he knew that he needed more money to make the project work. So he asked his friends in the mafia for money to build. The money the mafia would pony up in 1945 was $5 million. Siegel, who had begun dating Virginia Hill at the time, she also had a checkered past with the mafia as well. Obviously, we know her as the mob mole. Her role in the lives of some of history's biggest mobsters was basically very simple. She not only slept with them, but because she spoke Spanish fluently, she was often sent down to Mexico to ensure the drug routes were intact, and she was also used to sleep with drug barons down there to keep a close eye on them. It just gave the mafia an edge. She also was notorious for marrying wealthy men, absorbing their money, and disappearing. She also was used as a mafia messenger of sorts. So for whatever the reason, probably because he wanted to avoid a paper trail, he ends up putting Virginia Hill in charge of the construction of the hotel. As construction begins, problems start to begin as well. Not only was Siegel never fucking there, but the construction company would rob supplies at night that they provided and then turn around the next day and sell them back to Siegel and Virginia Hill for double the profit. So you sell them the planks of wood or drywall, you rob them overnight, you come back the next day and say, well, it must have gotten robbed. Now you're doubling up on your profits. Delays kept coming and the prices just kept going up. Eventually the casino would open and it was a huge flop. Not only did it cost over $6 million, which was way above what the mafia had thought it should cost. Adding to that, Chicago's outfit Wire Services, who were having problems in Nevada and Arizona, eventually gets going pretty steady. And numbers were coming in and the numbers were big. But a part of that deal was that California had to report those numbers as well. But Benny Siegel, who was frustrated and angered with Dragna taking a cut of those profits, refused to do it. Not only that, but he had also already been skimming off the top of those profits and not reporting it back to the mafia. So he's already stealing in that instance. To make matters even worse, Siegel tells anybody who would ask that he was the boss of California. And that created more problems. The mob was incensed at Siegel's ego, but they let it slide because Benny Siegel always had a way of making things work for them, and his reputation as an earner spoke for itself. One of the problems with the Flamingo was that it just wasn't finished. When they opened up the Flamingo, there were construction projects still underway. It was sort of a rush to open up. And there was actually an entire section that wasn't even completed yet. The mob expected more from Siegel, especially after money began to disappear and the costs kept rising. After 2 weeks, after the Flamingo opened, the mob would shut down the casino because they were in the negative $275,000. Bosses wanted Benny Siegel killed for that, and there were talks about killing him, but Meyer Lansky stepped up and he asked Luciano as a favor not to kill him and give him a second chance. Luciano would agree, but he also at the same time asked Meyer Lansky to look into rumors that Hill was traveling to Switzerland once a week, dropping off large sums of money to a mob-controlled bank, and he also wanted to know if it was true that Benny Siegel was beating the hell out of Virginia Hill. So the Flamingo would finish construction and they would reopen. And actually, it was a huge success. The casino was making a profit, but a few things started to happen. The first was Meyer Lansky found proof that not only was Hill traveling to Switzerland once a week to deposit large sums of money, but the numbers at the casino didn't match up to what Siegel was providing bosses. So once again, there's proof here that he is skimming off the top or stealing money. Where are we here? Sorry about that. So Luciano was told about the issue. He was given the proof, and Lansky also confirmed that Virginia Hill was being beaten up by Benny Siegel. The problem with Siegel beating up Virginia Hill was that she was the ex of Mo Dalitz. And Mo Dalitz had heard about this for a long time, and he wanted proof. And the fact that he found out that Benny Siegel was beating his ex, wanted Siegel dead over that. So at the Havana conference, Luciano heard enough. Despite Meyer Lansky's secondary pleas, Luciano had it. It was over. Not only were they getting robbed, but Benny Siegel was becoming a headache for the mafia. He was making too many waves. And he orders the death of Benny Siegel. So on June 20th of 1947, Bugsy Siegel would be killed sitting on a couch in his mansion, shot to death by Frankie Carbo with a .30 caliber M1 carbine. So the actual reasons why Benny Siegel was killed was he stole from the mafia on multiple levels. He had a lack of awareness about what was going on. Because if a construction site is getting robbed and he's never there to notice it, then he's either in on it or he's an idiot. Number 3, he was getting too noticed by law enforcement and Hollywood. Sort of like Joey Gallo had the same problem of hanging out with Jerry Orbach and celebrities. Benny Siegel began to have the same problems. Number 4, he started to claim he was the boss of California, which infuriated a lot of people. And number 5, he beat up Mo Dalitz's ex. So what you tend to see when people talk about this actual situation is they just say, well, he was taken from the mob, he was doing this. There were a lot of reasons why. And others that were less, I don't want to use the word popular, but others who were less tough than Benny Siegel would have been killed very quickly for that. And a lot of the question comes up is Dragna. Why would the mob send somebody out to run Los Angeles when they already had Jack Dragna? Well, the problem is Jack Dragna was very soft. He was a very soft guy because shortly after, even after Benny Siegel is killed, Jack Dragna starts to think, okay, well, maybe I got a shot here. But once again, Mickey Cohen was more violent than Benny Siegel ever could be. And that's saying something. And Mickey Cohen was not about to let anybody encroach in L.A. He called it his. And so one of the questions I get a lot on this is, well, why didn't the mafia back up Jack Dragna? They probably would have if he had been a tougher guy. If he had been a tougher guy, I think that would have been an issue. I think they definitely would have backed an Italian over the Jewish conglomerate. But in that particular issue, you also have to understand that a lot of the Vegas stuff at the time, too, was controlled by Meyer Lansky. So Luciano looked at it as, okay, well, we'll put Benny in. He's your number 2, so let's put him in. He, has shown the impetus for being able to earn an incredible amount of money. But eventually, it just went too far. And that's the reason why Benny Siegel was killed.